Welcome back to Alberta Primetime. How many workers are lying about sick days? Why are we still paying so much for some U.S. goods with our high loonie? And the same company that sells phones and TV service now wants to be a bank. A lot for our Monday Money panel to chew on tonight. Russ Dratt was an investment advisor with Canaccord Wealth Management. Shafik Hirani is a director and senior executive financial advisor at Investors Group Calgary. And Beth Hamilton-Keene is a director and portfolio manager with Moore Investment Management in Calgary. Welcome back, everybody, to Alberta Primetime.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll talk about the markets as well in a moment, because another interesting day. We'll go around and give everybody's thoughts. But first, a Senate Finance Committee is studying the price gap between U.S. and Canadian goods. Our dollar, of course, has been at par for months now. Russ, Canadians are just feeling ripped off. When are the prices going to go down?
Especially with the Canadian dollar being so high, is what the natural, logical thought process is. And I heard about this study. I kind of had a chuckle. I made a few phone calls because of the panel this evening, and the word was political rhetoric.
So nothing will happen. He's just saying this to appease us?
Well, there will be a study. The unfortunate thing is retailers are caught in the crosshairs here, and they're constantly being squeezed for their margin. I mean, whether it's competitors or just distribution is huge. I talked to our analyst, and she said, in Canada, our distribution is such a challenge for these American companies. In the U.S., they'll go into a central community and go 360 degrees from there. It's just north. When you come Canada, it's just north.
But that really hasn't changed. I mean, that's always been the case. And we've seen the dollar go up and down. It's been up for a really long time. So, Beth, I mean, the logic is that somewhere, somebody is making a profit more than before, and they're not passing it on to the consumer.
Well, hopefully this committee will help uncover some of the real truths underneath, but my suspicions are that it's taxes, tariffs, duties, and a number of other things that are kind of buried in those costs. That's going to be, I believe, the primary influence there, the main differentiator. I personally just got back from the United States myself and was an avid Macy's shopper this weekend, so
a lot of
I saw
good
the price
deals
differences
down there
firsthand.
Absolutely. It's not fair what we pay in Canada. I know you mentioned the shipping, Russ, but like I said, that's always been there. So, Shafik, if we take what Beth said, perhaps it's the federal finance minister, Jim Flaherty himself, the very person who ordered the investigation into the U.S.-Canadian price gap for goods. He's in control of tariffs. I personally think that perhaps it is some public tap dancing to make us all feel better. I'm very skeptical that we'll get any real answers. We once heard about a minister demanding for answers on gas prices, and did we ever get any? I can't recall.
Right.
Is this fancy footwork, or do you think there's really something here that can be done? Should government perhaps get involved in price controls? When the loonies as high as it is, shouldn't the consumer benefit somehow?
Yeah, and I honestly, personally, I don't believe any kind of tariff is going to help. I mean, the problem is the Canadians are going and purchasing cheaper stuff in the United States, and if Jim Flaherty, through the Senate committee, wants to increase tariffs, well, Canadians aren't going to save anything. They're just going to buy more Canadian products at a higher rate, and the only person benefiting is the Canadian Revenue Canada, which is paying more, which the Canadians are paying more taxes. So I don't think that's necessarily the answer. The challenging thing here is that Canadians do pay higher taxes, like Beth said, so that does increase sort of the cost of living. Secondly, Canadians do enjoy a higher standard of living. So that does offset a little bit of the lower prices in the States, and I agree with you, Jennifer. I don't think I think there will be a delay in how long it takes to get those measurements in the scale. So it's a little bit of hurry up and wait.
Another thing on the finance minister's desk eventually, Russ, will be an application from Rogers Communications. Yes, the cable and phone company now wants to also be a bank. It seems strange to some people.
Well, it's not a brick and mortar scenario that they want to go. They've seen the huge financial implications that Canadian Tire with the financial department and these credit cards.
Walmart, President's Choice.
Absolutely. So they just want it. It's a great profit margin. So they're not going to get into the brick and mortar, do the debt financing and things of that nature at this stage. That's for certain.
More of the mobile payment services. Is that where the future is?
Absolutely. So it's just going to help their bottom line.
Beth, he just mentioned there, Canadian Tire, we know Walmart, President's Choice. It seems that anybody can get into banking. They're very, very profitable. They're doing well at it. Is it a good thing or a bad thing then for consumers? They seem to be making money, but how do we fit in?
Well, certainly as an investor, you can certainly benefit from the profit margins. But keep in mind, too, this process got quite a few barriers to entry. The whole process is expected to take about a year to go through for the banking status so that they can issue their credit card and issue the debt and so forth. The main thing for Rogers is really going to be to work their way more into the supply chain. If you look at Apple, for example, and some of those that are benefiting from the transactions and the downloading of apps and a number of other things, the mobile payments is certainly a very lucrative area that if they don't participate in, certainly some of their competitors will. So this is going to be an area that they really naturally have to follow.
Does it matter, Shafik, if we've got another bank that is headquartered in, you guessed it, Toronto? We've already got nearly 24 domestic banks, more foreign-owned banks. Here in Alberta, there's Service, formerly ATB, and Western Credit Union. Do we need more homegrown banking for Albertans?
Well, it's debatable. The one thing that Rogers, they're going to be terming themselves Rogers Bank, and the one thing that they're not doing is they're not setting themselves up as a trust company. They're not setting themselves up as a Schedule 1 or a Tier 1 bank. So they're going to be a Tier 2 bank. And is it a good thing for Rogers? Like Beth says, I like the vertical integration. I think that's good for Rogers. Are people going to buy into this? No. I don't think the average person is going to switch banks, but there are a niche that is not happy with the banks in general. And there is a market niche, and what Rogers has is they have a lot of branches. So what the challenges Canadian Tire and Superstore face, Rogers has a lot of branches that they can capitalize on this new market.
Right. Well, next we want to ask you if you've lied about being sick, because there are new stats on how much Canadian workers play hooky and how we compare to other nations. We also want to talk about the markets today. That's coming up. Welcome back to Alberta Primetime and the Monday Money Panel. We're going to quickly check in on the market, see what our guests have to say about today's action. Russ, a bit of a wild day again on the markets. What's your take on what's happened? What do you advise investors? Anyone with an RSP and mutual funds jittery right now?
More of the same, and I don't see what's going to change. What's going to be the catalyst? I mean, in the States, they're talking jobs. I mean, that's the key. But
Europe financial crisis triggered today's losses.
Absolutely huge. Greece actually came out and said they only have enough money for a few more weeks. I mean, where's that going to end up? So it only represents, I believe, 2 or 3% of the GDP for the European Union. So hopefully that can be dealt with. What's happening in Europe is they're not kicking the can down the road. They're trying to deal with the debt situation.
So how do you deal with it if you're sitting in Alberta with some mutual funds, some money in the stock market? Don't fall asleep at the wheel. Understand what your long-term vision is. If you're looking for short-term gains, what's going to be the catalyst to do that? I certainly don't see any short-term catalysts. It's going to be a long, arduous task for all these European and American communities to get their... Shafik, the RBC economics folks sharply reduced their GDP forecast today for Canada, the United States, and the world. They're joining a chorus of others. We saw oil fall today. It eventually did rebound to $88. The loonie, though, slipped to its lowest level since January for a time today. The euro hit a 10-year low. What's your take on things, and what are you telling your clients?
Okay, first of all, the RBC census, the economic data, they did drop GDP. I think that's really important to reflect on, because if you take a look at the original GDP forecast, it was 2.5%. As of June 30th, we had a quarter of negative growth in GDP. So if I'm an investor and it lives in Alberta, I have to understand that the definition of a recession is 2 negative quarters back-to-back in GDP. So if GDP is negative again for the next quarter, then we will officially slide into a recession. So that's the first thing that's pretty bad. Just really quickly, the second thing is today was kind of important that the first time the Canadian dollar slipped below parity and then rebounded a little bit, but there is a little bit downward pressure even on the loonie itself. So I agree with the rest. I think it's time to sort of look longer term, but be very defensive right now.
Beth?
Certainly caution plays through. There's no question about that. I would say, although that we are very focused on and very absorbed with right now the reasons for pessimism, certainly the European financial crisis, how things are going to work out there, what's going on in the United States, there are certainly reasons for optimism as well. Certainly as we look around, there are, we certainly see lower interest rates for quite some time to come. There's certainly some optimism with the U.S. job bill that may be coming out. It's probably get changed up a little bit, but certainly I think that will breathe back some optimism optimism back into the markets. And even just at the close of markets today, the rumor and talk of the Chinese buying up some of the Italian debt and instruments may, help rally things on the European side. So there is hope, there is optimism. I really reinforce here that we're talking about slowdown in growth, but not absolute recession. I think we're still quite far from an absolute recession, but just really slow, tepid growth, and we've just got to settle into that expectation.
Russ, is perhaps the best investment right here in our own backyard, the energy stocks?
Well, I think it's important. Every sector has its heydays. I mean, uranium seems to be one coming of age.
Banking always does well.
Well,
sometimes
Americans would beg to differ. Europeans
Canadian
would beg
banks.
to differ, but Canadian banks. But I think people have to realize we're in the valley. It's whether we're in the valley of death. It always feels like the valley of death. But there's great opportunity, and you have to understand when you're in that valley, that's your best opportunity. I've been buying baskets of American companies that are paying 6 to 9% dividends. You don't want to get carried away and put too much in any one company, because if they cut the dividend, the stock or preferred will get hammered.
But there are some doing well out there.
You really have to, don't fall asleep at the wheel. This is a great opportunity, and all this pessimism, I think, is just, you flip it, turn it, and take advantage of it.
Just very quickly, because we promised we'd talk about this, an international survey by human resources firm Kronos Incorporated shows 52% of Canadian workers say they play hooky, and there's how we stack up to some of the others. China and India, much worse. We're about the same as Americans. France, hardly any. Of course, I think they have 4-day weeks there. Beth, as the labor crunch tightens up in Alberta, are people going to be doing this more? Will employers have any choice but to tolerate fake sick days?
Well, I certainly hope not. And my hope is that the guilt of it all will certainly overcome that temptation to call in sick when you're not. But however, all that being said, there does seem to be a correlation, and you mentioned France. Canada has one of the lowest numbers in terms of looking at those markets around the world, lowest number of paid vacation days. And so I do believe there's probably some correlation there. France has the highest number, therefore they're not calling in sick as much. They don't need to. Canada, on the other hand, perhaps there's some shift in terms of what's acceptable to the employee. However, as things tighten up, it may not be as easy to call in sick if you're worried about your job.
You know, Jennifer, Beth and I were talking off camera, and she has never taken a sick day or skipped a high school class since she's been working.
I've taken a sick day when I'm sick.
Well, a sick day when she's sick, but never.
That was a personal day. She's never taken a personal day.
Never
Good
a
job.
hooky day.
Thank you all for your insight tonight. Appreciate having you. Russ Straught was an investment advisor with Canaccord Wealth Management. Shafik Hirani is a director and senior executive financial advisor at Investors Group Calgary. And Beth Hamilton-Keene, director and portfolio manager, as well as workhorse extraordinaire with more investment management in Calgary.